Mr Chair.
Call, Fletcher Tabato.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll just plead to your patience and just take this time to acknowledge the Chairman of the Select Committee, to acknowledge the members of the Select Committee and acknowledge their efforts and their work. I acknowledge that on the other side of the House there were some hard questions asked, and I acknowledge especially the work of those of my peers sitting on the left-hand side of the table who would constantly and diligently dig and try to understand what the government was trying to achieve. And we speak today of compromise. But Mr Chair, I would put it to the House that no compromise has been reached. There has been no compromise on warrantless surveillance. There has been no compromise on the use of video surveillance. There has been no compromise on the access to passports, and there has been no compromise on the access of the SIS to the database of our customs agents. There has been no compromise as to the oversight of the Inspector General, whose role remains the same. And so, Sir, specifically, for example, we talk about a warrantless surveillance, and we've already had quite detailed discussions about, and I acknowledge that the definition has been refined. And Mr Mitchell spoke about the straightforward nature of reading the suppressing terrorism legislation. But I put it to you, sir, that whilst it is straightforward to read from the page, it is another thing, sir, to interpret the intent of those words and exactly what it is they are trying to achieve. And so when we come to the conversation around a compromise, actually, in my humble opinion, from my time on that Select Committee and from the numerous submissions I have heard, sir, no compromise has been reached. We still will have this warrantless surveillance, and we still will have video surveillance. And to the video surveillance, the advisors spoke about how we're using chunks of legislation and we're pulling them together to make this omnibus piece of legislation straightforward and robust, in that there is existing template, and therefore we should be satisfied that the legislation is robust. However, and it was spoken to by numerous members in the House already, the threshold for video surveillance for those other members of law enforcement as opposed to surveillance and information gathering is so much more rigorous. And I put it to the Minister that whilst we must never confuse the roles of our enforcement agencies and the roles of our surveillance and information gathering agencies, we have had it put to us, it has been argued and it has been put to the public, that there is this sense of urgency, that we know something's going to happen, we must react to it. And so I simply ask the question, under the Search and Surveillance Act, the police already have these rights that we speak of today.
A point of order, Dr Kennedy Graham.
I'm sorry to interrupt my colleague, and I don't wish to shatter the crystal that was prevailing in the Select Committee. But correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that officials are only to relate to the Minister and the Chair and not to other members of Parliament?
That's correct. That is correct. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't... I hear what you say, and that is correct. All right, we won't do it again. Fletcher Tabato.
Thank you, Mr Chair. What I was saying was, you know, there's almost an argument where we're at a stage where there is a supposed clear and present danger. Those words weren't used, those are my words, I concede that point. But if this is the case, if we are in such a state, if this is so urgent, then the police have the right to do what it is we now ask of our SIS agency. And, sir, given the nature of the process we have been through, given the lack of voice from the New Zealand public. And actually, I put this to you, that during Select Committee, and I mentioned how there were some robust questions asked, even from those on the government side. Actually, what seemed to be the most common answer, and it was an answer said with a level of frustration and disappointment, was that, in fact, we cannot answer your questions, Mr Chair.
Calling Fletcher Tabato.
The submitters told us quite openly when we asked them, well, what would you do? Or how would you interpret that? Or what do you think would happen then? The submitters quite clearly and with a tone in their voice replied, you have not given us enough time to consider the implications and the ramifications of what it is you're asking. And sir, there is no compromise reached in this House today. Everything that was in this bill in its original form will come to pass, albeit with different words, but the outcome will be the same. I just will use the rest of my time. I've made a note here. It's been commented by the media about the increase in the powers of the Inspector General. And I just want to make it very clear to the New Zealand public and to the members in the House today that the powers of the Inspector General have not changed due to this legislation. This was not the purview of the Select Committee or this piece of legislation. What was increased, and I acknowledge the efforts of the members across the way there, was not the powers of the Inspector General, but rather the obligations of the Minister and of the Director of the SIS and their obligations to the Inspector General. And I acknowledge that that created an element where reporting and the submission of information to an independent body was required. But sir, this conversation about the role and the responsibilities of the Inspector General has come up in this House before. The Inspector General herself described her role and her job as a role that is for the benefit of the Minister. How can then we say that the Inspector General will hold the Minister to account when under legislation for that exact position, and by her own words, she exists for the benefit of the Minister? She will come back and she will say, you have done wrong, sir. But she will say this to the Minister who has done wrong, sir. She will report back to the very person who is liable and must be held to account, albeit along with the warrants officer. But, sir, this is what this legislation is saying. This is what the clause will tell her to do. And then we spoke about her reporting powers and the public nature and how we are publicly accountable. Sir, again, her own words, the reports are reduced and cut in such a way as to not give away state secrets. And absolutely right, there might be ongoing cases where we cannot compromise missions of our security agents, and we wouldn't want them to do that. We need them to get the bad guys. We do. But we're not achieving what we set out to do. The Inspector General gave 8 recommendations, I believe, in her latest report. Those recommendations were taken on board by the Minister, and we are informed that they will be acted upon. So that may be precedence, but it does not mean that in the future the Minister will simply say, thank you for your recommendations, I choose to ignore them, and we will carry on as we currently are. Thank you.